welcome to Restorative Yoga. I have these really woolly socks, and so I'll encourage you to, like, if you might need like little mittens or you might need little socks if your fingers and toes tend to get chilly, because this is a very slow practice. So generally for this sort of thing in the winter, I like some woolly socks. The other things you might need for class today, yoga today, are some blankets, some pillows, maybe even some yoga blocks, if you've got those things at your house. If you don't, no sweat, just some fluffy things like pillows and blankets will do. Regular pillows, like bed pillows, you may need several of them stacked up on top of each other to sort of equivalize, is that a word? Like a yoga bolster. If not, couch cushions work really great. And then the other thing you can do is take a quilt and roll it up really tight, like you're rolling up a sleeping bag to put it back in the bag, so really tight. And that will work like a bolster in place of it. So we're gonna start with a reclining butterfly pose. And I'm gonna build sort of like a little couch. So I'm gonna take a yoga block. You could also use a book. I'm gonna put a pillow up there just so that my head is a little higher up. And then I'm gonna take a blanket and roll it up so that this will fill in the gap underneath my knees where they don't touch the ground. Now some people, when they put their feet together and drop the knees open, the knees touch the ground all the way. So if that's the case, you may not need the extra blanket. Oh. And then we're just gonna lay ourselves down. Oh, I'm gonna grab the edge of this blanket. And I'm just gonna adjust until I like all of the parameters. I like where my head is hanging out. It feels like my low back has the right amount of support. Sometimes it helps to pick the pelvis up and kind of tilt it forward and back a little bit to try to find the just right. I like my elbows to touch the floor. So if whatever surface you're on means your arms kind of float, you may have to fill in with a couple of towels. And then I also am going to cover up my whole body. Again, just in an effort to be as warm as possible in a chilly environment. So in the summertime, this was not necessary. So if it's if it's warm where you are, you've got really good heat, you may not need the extra. So feet together, knees open, support there for me under the thigh, covering the whole thing with a blanket. And sometimes the issue, like with blankets that have fringe, like this one, is like the fringe becomes tickly after a while. So usually I tuck it in so it doesn't tickle my face. And then find your arms in a comfortable position. Make sure that you have like the right kind of position for your head, so it doesn't feel like your chin's being kind of pushed into your breastbone. Sometimes a little extra head support, like another folded towel or blanket under the head, works best. And then we're going to rest. And the yoga practice is a practice of resting. We get into the shape, support it with as much pillows and blankets and soft things as we need. Sometimes we'll even put weight on the body, so you could even put like a pillow over the legs or over the belly to kind of help kind of weigh you down a little bit. Which, if you're feeling really spacey or sometimes even anxious, having a little bit of weight on the body, a weighted blanket works really great too if you have one of those, can actually feel very calming. If it feels too intense on the joints, by all means, go with the lighter covering like I have here. So we let the pose do all the work, basically just gravity in the shape that we put our bones in. And then the work that we're doing is more subtle. So we're going to take a little journey through the body with our awareness. We're going to try to get really fine-tuned in our attention. So like quite often there's a little bit of muscle tension for me just right here between my eyebrows, right? So I'm going to take a few breaths to explore unwinding tension from that area. And you may find it in other places, like the sides of your scalp or the jaw, or you may find little pockets of tension under your shoulder blades or in the hip, vertebrae, like the bottom of your rib cage and the top of your pelvis, right? Like right in that little low back zone. And it could be other places too, soles of your feet even. Fingers or palms of your hand might be holding some tension or clutching or grasping. So the work of restorative yoga is to unwind, try to consciously relax tension from those areas. So it's an undoing more than a doing. And then we use the breath as a grounding, as a kind of focusing, as a way to, almost like we're trying to breathe softness into those places. You can imagine like the breath touching those muscles you just relaxed. Just sort of rinsing out all the stress and tension that might have been there for a bit. Now, if you're like me and you have habitual tension, places where you carry tension all the time, no matter what's going on, this may be a process you keep coming back to. You might get all the way down to your toes with your attention and come back to your eyebrows and they're knitted back together again, right? So just recognize this is a process and we're just gonna do our best to soften and relax. We'll stay with this guy for about another 3 minutes. Just a couple more breaths. And bring your attention back out to sort of the whole thing all at once now. And it's possible that we were able to unwind, and it's also possible that it will take several poses for us to find that sort of deep unwinding. It's okay. We greet our practice wherever it lands on any given day, right? We don't have to wait for the perfect circumstances. Now, I'm gonna just slowly straighten out my legs, so that's gonna be the first unwinding from here. Just giving myself like little ankle circles. Sometimes right after I leave a pose, it feels really nice just to pause, and sometimes I need a little bit of movement, and then I can pause. So now I'm just sort of taking my attention and scanning through my legs just to see how the sensations might be interesting or different left to right, inside of the hip to the outside of the hip, and down the length of the legs. Now, I need to get myself off of this propped up circumstance. So I'm gonna do that by just being pretty lazy about it. I'm gonna roll to the side and then just take that stuff out. Now, once I've done that, I'm gonna roll back onto my back. And mostly what I'm doing with all of this stuff is just trying to be as easygoing about the transitions as possible. So it doesn't matter if you do it exactly the same way. We're just trying to keep as much of that sort of soft, relaxed state as we can, given the circumstances. Now, I'm going to give myself a little stretch here. And notice how my back might unwind a little bit onto the floor from having been propped up on the pillow. There's a kind of impression that sort of feels like I'm still slightly on a pillow. So I'm gonna let that impression kind of soften a little bit while I press my whole upper back into the floor and rock on it. Oh, that feels nice. Now we're gonna do a little spinal twist, and so everybody will be a little different in this. Just genetically, this is one of the poses where there's just a lot of diversity. So the legs are going to wind up on one side. We're going to lay on one hip, and the legs are going to somehow rest. So for some folks, when they bring the legs over, the shoulders don't move at all. There's plenty of rotation in the spine and plenty of length in these muscle areas that it doesn't impact. Like the upper back will stay perfectly level on the floor. For me, when my legs go to the right, there's a little bit of a tug, a little bit of a lift in my left shoulder. Some versions, a lot of lift. So I am gonna fill in some space under here so that my left shoulder rests on the ground as heavy as I can keep it. So to do that, I'm gonna use the pillow that I had under my back. You could also use a stack of things. You might need a bunch of pillows or a bunch of blankets or something along that line. Now, I'm gonna experiment with the different ways for my legs to hang out so that it feels like I can rest my legs really comfortably, so they're not gonna fall apart or slide off of one another. And that is just an experiment almost every single time I do it. Now, one thing that helps me is to take my low back. There's kind of a little hollow right here. And I'm gonna take a blanket and just sort of roll it up, and I'm gonna make it kind of loose so I can squish it. And I'm gonna fill in this hollow under my back so I can lean into the blanket. And that gives my left shoulder that kind of heaviness so that my shoulders feel more even. And then I've sort of got my legs positioned in a way that makes it feel like they're not gonna fall apart. And then I'm just gonna throw this blanket over the top of my legs. Sometimes I'll put a sandbag up on top of there just to hold that all in place. But for now, I'm just gonna do that. Okay. And then your head can turn the same direction as the legs, the opposite direction, or kind of up toward the ceiling. Just depends on how your neck wants to hang out. And you can choose according to what feels best. And the arms can be more out or up above. You can do one thing with one arm and something different with the other arm. Oh, you can even tuck the arms over you if you like. And then we'll stay with this guy for about 4 minutes or so. And again, once we're here and once we've sort of settled into a place where we're not gonna feel like we're resisting the pose in any way, right? We've got enough pillows, blankets, soft things that the body can relax or rest without feeling unstable. So we've got the stability handled. Then the next part is pay attention and unwind. Which I think the second part is way harder, quite often. And there might be like, sometimes when we unwind muscles, emotions come up. So let yourself, to the degree possible, just experience those. You don't have to analyze them. You don't have to try to find reasons to not feel the way, whatever the feelings might be. Just let them surface, experience them as they are. Maybe with a curiosity about what it feels like in the body for that emotion to arise. How there might be some resistance in the mind. And then let it move through you almost like a weather pattern. Change with my arm, and we'll see if I like it in a minute. It's okay to fiddle with your pose, but do it and then pause again. Relax, and then fiddle if you need to again. If you find yourself being super fidgety though, go all the way back to the beginning and try to find stability. Little bit of tension in my right index finger. So just relaxing that. There's interesting sometimes little pockets of muscle tension that we'll find as we go along. Breath refresh you. Sometimes I'll stop looking for tension and just let the whole body breathe, and that'll do the work all by itself. Stay for a couple more breaths. Take one more big inhale. And then as I exhale, I'm going to slide this blanket out from underneath my back and roll onto it. And again, I'm going to be as gentle, as peaceful, and slow as possible so that I just unwind carefully. And having just slid out of that pose, there's a kind of asymmetry that I'm experiencing between the left side of my body and the right. That's normal. We just did a pose where one thing was happening on one side and something different on the other. So again, you can do some movement, you can find a still place, you can do a combination of those. Just notice how the body sort of releases the pose itself kind of slowly. So we brought the body out of it, but can you feel how the muscle and the connective tissue maybe takes a little, maybe it's the nervous system, it takes a little bit longer to shift. There's kind of slowly sort of settling kind of sensation. And things just soften up a little bit. The sensations slowly lighten. I find it really interesting. I'm not quite ready to do the other side, but I will be probably in another 3 or 4 breaths. So I'm just going to go ahead and put my pillow on this side because I know I'm going to want that. I don't know where yet. Somewhere. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and take my legs over toward the side. And I'm just going to fiddle with the props until it feels like I've got the angles right. So things kind of settle into place. I'm going to give myself this little low back cushion. And then I'm going to wind up a little bit of a kind of larger blanket here, both for a little bit of extra warmth and kind of hold things in place. I'm just kind of tucking it in a little, and then choosing a head position that I like. Trying to find a sense of relaxing and letting go through the legs, through the shoulders, leaning into the floor. Once you get yourself settled, you just take that little journey, kind of unwinding things as you go. I always start with my face because almost always there's like a little bit of tension around my eyes, there's a little bit of tension around my mouth. That's just habitual efforting. As I get the pose settled, I'm efforting a little bit. I'm creating effort in my body and my attention. So starting with unwinding that effort. And then as I sort of travel around, I might notice, oh, I need to do it in a couple of other places around the shoulders or what have you. Just unwind those places too. gonna take about 3 more breaths, friends. Once again, I'm just gonna slowly unwind. Now, eventually, we're gonna come to a seated position, but again, I'm gonna take my time kind of unwinding this pose first. Noticing any kind of differences between the coming out of the last one and this one. There's a little more sense of symmetry for me on this one. It's a little softer feeling. But still, just kind of let the body pause for a moment in the, in between. And then when you're ready, you can kind of gently roll yourself over and push up. Now, seated forward bends can be the trickiest poses for people who suffer from some low back issues, particularly some disc herniations or disc degeneration, that sort of thing. So, with that in mind, you may want to employ some furniture because if you lean forward and keep the spine sort of aligned with the pelvis, it might be that you need like something that will be high enough that you can even kind of greet it quite early on. Now, for me, it doesn't cause any discomfort around my lower back. In fact, it feels nice. So I'm gonna build a little stack of pillows that will meet me about halfway. We should each do what's right for us. So if you need furniture, grab a chair, or if your couch is high enough off the floor of the bed, you can slide underneath it and put yourself up, use the edge of it as a support. All right, now we're gonna have the legs out straight. We're gonna have them slightly apart, but not necessarily as wide as they'll go. I mean, you can go wider, but I'm just gonna go for a slightly wide. And then I'm filling in the gap underneath my knee joint. So when my leg is extended, because of the size of my calf muscle, there's a little hollow space underneath each knee. So I'm just filling in the hollow space. That may not be required for everybody. Some people may want to sit up on the edge of a blanket so that the hips are slightly elevated. And then if you slip to the edge of the blanket, it'll sort of tilt your hips forward for you. So if you have a tough time with the hips tilting forward, that may be the right answer. And then I'm going to use some pillows and some other props here. Sort of give myself, again, kind of like a little shelf to just rest into. Now, I've got this position so that my forehead can rest on the pillow, but there's not a lot of weight going on in my neck or what have you. If there were, I would adjust the pillows, or if it develops, I'll adjust the pillows. The other thing I'm going to do is, again, just for warmth and maybe a little bit of weight, is I'm going to cover this whole thing with a blanket. It'll take me a second to fiddle with the ends. Alright, so now we're going to hang out with this guy for a little bit. About 6 minutes or so.
as I release tension, sometimes I have to do little adjustments. And then I just go back to this kind of notion of softening everything. Trying to unwind. And I'm really using my breath, not in a super aggressive way, but just to notice how the muscles shift with the breath, and then return with the exhale. Almost like the breath is constantly massaging the body from the inside. Found that I was just holding myself, almost like I'm trying to draw myself away from the pillows. So again, I've been here for a while, and yet I just found another pocket of tension. So again, check in with yourself. Sometimes for me, they're super sneaky. They'll slip under my radar. Stay for about another minute. take a couple more deep breaths. I'm gonna catch this pillow, and then with an inhale, I'm just gonna slowly bring myself up.
Just kind of unwind my spine. I don't really want to leave the blanket, it's toasty in there, but I'm going to. All right. Oh, I'm gonna bend my knees. And just for a moment, I'm just gonna pause. This kind of more upright position. Kind of letting my spine shift from feeling like this to being willing to be slightly more neutral. Now, we're gonna do just a little kind of movement. I call this the washing machine. And if you're not ready yet, don't do it yet. Just kind of back and forth sort of twist, but dynamic. Do 2 more, 1 more, and then pause. And then the dynamic movement is going to become a little side to side, a little side flexion. Leave the arm out of it if you want. I'm gonna do 2 more of those. Okay, and then coming back up, I'm gonna do some round and some little back bendy, just these little cat stretchy shapes. Not just cats, I'm sure lots of animals do these. Or something similar. You can even make a little circle if you want. So sort of pass through those shapes. The other direction. Now, we're going to do a supported bridge pose, and I'm going to use a pillow, so it'll go down the whole length. It'll hold my hips and my lower half of my back, and then the upper half of my back, my shoulders are going to rest on the floor. Oh, I'm using the wrong blanket. Hold on. Okay. So you might want the thicker blanket. So I'm going to have a blanket where my shoulders are going to rest, and I'm going to put it on the ground. I'm kind of smooth it out a little bit here. And essentially, this is where my upper back is going to rest, and my head, right? So my head and my upper back are going to rest on this blanket. I'm just gonna iron it out a little bit. And then somewhere around like just below my shoulder blades-ish is where this pillow is gonna start. So my shoulder blades will be like somewhere just high of this. And then my lower back and my hips will rest on this. And then my legs I'm gonna extend out, probably one at a time, but you can do both at the same time. Okay, so I have to set that up. So I'm gonna put this just in front of that blanket. Okay. And then I'm going to sit on it. And lie back. And I just have to back it up until I get just about the right position. And this is just about right for me. Like my pelvis is pretty well supported. My shoulders are resting on the floor, The legs outstretched doesn't feel bad. I could elevate the legs a little bit if it feels like it's too intense across the hip right here. And I would do that just by putting a pillow under my feet or something, yoga block. You can also have the feet resting on the floor, so it's a more traditional looking bridge pose. And do one leg at a time outstretched, which I might do. We'll see. So again, I'm going to start with the legs stretched all the way out, cover up a bit, and then decide how that feels. So I'm being held in like the babiest little bridge pose up here at the top of my back, so it's a back bend, but it's pretty lightweight. Now your back might be different than mine, and you might need a different level, different height. You might need more than one pillow. You might need something, you can even also just put the support under the hips and leave all this middle to lower back area above the hips, leave all that empty. And that might feel better to you. Now, this is quite pleasant, so I'm going to hang out. We're going to stay for about 5 minutes. Right in that zone. I'm just going to make one subtle change and bend one knee a little bit more and rest that foot on the ground. So it'll just shift me slightly to one side. I'm going to try to unwind a little more deeply and see how it goes. I'll do this for a couple minutes and then switch to the other one.
definitely shift legs. And depending on what you're up to, you might just stay put, relax a little more deeply. We just have a couple minutes left. So we're going to take 3 more breaths. Now to come out of this, all I'm going to do essentially is just on my exhale coming up here, just roll onto my side. Now I'm close to the ground, so that wasn't too far a journey, but if it's a little too far for you, you can definitely your elbow on the floor first to catch. And then I'm just moving the pillow out from underneath my back and rolling back onto the back. Now, essentially this is where we're gonna land for our last pose. But before we get to that, there's this kind of unwinding that we may need to engage in. For your final pose, you can do a sort of stacked up situation where you either put your legs up the wall, or you can put your legs up like over the seat of a chair, or on the couch or something like that, up on a bed, whatever you've got furniture wise. I am instead just going to take a really big pillow and put that under my legs so that my legs are held up a bit, but not too far. And this is just to take any pressure out of the low back, to release the pressure from the hip flexors. And again, you can do that in whatever way seems appropriate. For me, this little bit bigger pillow kind of does the trick of getting a little bit of an elevation in the thighs. Okay, so that said, I'm still kind of not completely ready to settle. So before I land there for good, I'm gonna do some little kind of happy baby rocking a little side to side. And I'm going to adjust this head support so it's not under my shoulders anymore, but just under my head. I might double it up, but we'll see. Now, I have the fluffy socks on, so I'm going to let the blanket stop at my ankles, but it helps to kind of drag it down there with my feet. Okay. And I'm trying like little tucks of the pelvis, like slight adjustments to find just right. Adjusting the head support. Now you don't want your head to be like in this kind of chin up position, nor do you want your chin kind of forced into your chest. Just somewhere sort of level. But for some of us, like the upper back is rounded to a degree that
you need a little extra support. So you might have like a pillow or whatever you need to kind of fill in the gap so your head and your neck can kind of rest in a neutral position. And again, I'm going to tuck my little fringes in so they don't tickle my face, and adjust so the arms are covered, mostly anyway. The fingertips might stick out a bit, but mostly covered. And then we'll do some Shavasana. We'll stay with this guy for a good 6 or 7 minutes. We really want to let the body unwind. If we stay longer than about 8 minutes, we might nap. Although if that's not going to be an issue, you can stay as long as you want for sure. But we want long enough that we can really, let go. And it takes me sometimes a little bit of time to find the just right. Sometimes I like my arms kind of resting over my body. Sometimes I like them closer in against me, sometimes farther out, sometimes even like a star almost feels really nice, which I'm gonna try out today because it's feeling like that. And then sometimes I like my elbow slightly bent, sometimes the arms a little more on the straight edge, straighter out. Take the time you need to find all of these little subtle adjustments that will help you to completely surrender. All little pockets of tension completely softened. We're not hyper vigilant with the brain, with the mind. We're just a little bit vigilant in that we keep kind of circling around with our attention so that we can unwind any little pockets of muscle contraction or stress or whatever that we find along the way. Remember, every now and then, just let yourself rest. And come back to the overall picture. And just rest a little deeper.
go anywhere yet, but just notice your breath again. Now take a nice big breath. And we're going with a big sigh. You can stretch and move around. That's being stubborn. Take your time, but eventually we're going to come to a seated position. Not in a hurry to even open my eyes. So, thank you for joining me for some restorative yoga. Hopefully your body feels rested and your mind maybe even a little bit too. Take a nice big breath and a deep sigh. And enjoy the rest of your day. Welcome. Namaste.